Jennifer Hale, welcome to Head on Fire. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Don, and thank you to everybody out there. I am so excited to be here. Yes.
I am pumped to be here as well. Now, I sometimes when I have people on that I know are kind of like very buzzy right now, or the algorithm is introducing them to new people, I will hide those questions till the end of the episode so
Yeah.
that people have to listen to the whole thing to get to it. However, I am personally far too excited to ask these questions, so I'm going to ask them up front.
Let's do it.
What was it like being Jean Grey on X-Men 97?
It was awesome. I feel like I won a lottery because the truth is, look, I've been voice acting forever, and there are several of us who've played Jean Grey and played her very, very well. And I feel so fortunate that my turn came up in the roster when it was this show. I mean, it's not like we actually have a rotating roster. We always audition,
Little
but
Rolodex.
yeah, right? Like, oh, it's your turn today. Like, oh, good. Oh, it's a tiny project. No, this was just such good fortune. I mean, the creators and the team were so incredible, and I'm just so lucky. I'm incredibly. I mean, I work. Everybody I know who's lucky, all of us, and you know this. We work diligently and consistently and in a very dedicated manner for our luck, and we also have luck as well. Because I know a lot of people who are diligent
Yeah.
and consistent and don't have the same level of fortune.
Yeah. I 100% resonate that with that as an author. It's the amount of time. I was saying something last year sometime where I was kind of preparing my audience. I was like, it's going to look like I'm one of those overnight successes in the next couple of years because I have a whole lot of books that are about to just kind of like come out all
Yes.
in a line,
Yes.
and it's going to be like, oh gosh, look at all this writing he's been doing. I'm like, that is years of work, and it just happens to all be coalescing at the same time in different
Yeah.
genres and stuff. So I very much resonate with that piece of being prepared for luck to happen to you.
Yes, and I think it is so important to presence those years of preparation. Like, when I moved to LA, I had been behind the mic for 10 years, since
Hmm.
I was in high school, and so when I moved there, I had done hundreds of commercials, radio commercials, TV kind of thing where you show up on the car lot in the sweltering heat of Alabama, and they hand you a 30-second spot that's actually written to about 37, and you gotta deliver it in 29 while carrying a microphone that still has a cord attached, not tripping over yourself, not being blinded by the reflector, and you memorize the copy on the spot. Like, that's the
Mm.
volume and kind of stuff I'd done for years, and then in and out of the booth, so that when I showed up in that first session to record my demo in LA, I looked like some kind of wonder kid, some kind of crazy talent. And the truth was, I just put in the time. And this
Yeah.
culture we're in isn't celebrating that. It's not
Hmm.
acknowledging, like, we have a history. I'm going to language it like it's already happening the way I would prefer it handled, which is that we value our elders. We're just
Hmm.
beginning to learn to value our elders. We have historically discarded people with experience under their belt and time put in, and we've glamorized this overnight success thing, which is so damaging to people. It leaves them feeling less than and like, what's wrong with them? And it also overlooks what we've done to get there. Anyway,
I,
off the
you know,
soapbox. Go ahead.
I say this a lot to people. I am so glad that there are folks out there that made it big when they were 20 or 21 or 25 or something. So glad for them. I am equally as glad it did not happen for me then. Very, very glad that I didn't have hundreds of thousands of people watching what I was doing at 21 or 25 or even 28. Because, like,
Yes.
I was not prepared. I was not in the right place. But I will also, like, not just like personality wise, I also wasn't good enough at my craft at the time. I wasn't good enough then.
Oh,
And I'm really glad that somebody didn't say yes to me then, because
yeah.
I would never have become the writer I am now had I not had those no's and had I not had that time to prepare myself.
Oh, so true.
I so voice acting, the very nature of voice acting tends to lend itself to being in media that people see as for kids. Video games, animated TV shows, movies. You know, I have been listening to you since I was a bebe and you were Ivy on Carmen
Oh
San
my god!
Diego.
That was my first animated series. Oh my god.
Yeah, and I had a deep and abiding love for Carmen San Diego ever since I literally watched the Netflix reboot like when it came out because I just have such fond memories for it. Has
Yes.
being in that world and doing so many things that you know were going to end up in younger hands, has that given you a greater appreciation for the stories that we give to kids and younger minds and younger eyes and younger ears?
Mm, that is a great question. I'm I'm such a worshiper of writers.
Mm,
I really am. That I see myself always as a servant to the story. So what knowing that my work is going to kids and families, because that's the crazy thing is, on shows like X-Men 97, they've become shared family experiences, which is so cool. Knowing that my work is going to kids, first of all, knowing that it's going out in the world, it's incredibly important to me to mind my vibe, and at the risk of sounding like someone who lived in California for a long time, because I did, I was very but present to the fact that how I show up is a really important piece of the equation. Even down to the mood I bring to the session, the vibe I bring to a line, the intention I bring, the way I behave. I'm putting a signal on that recording that is beyond the words, it's beyond the performance, it's the spark of who I am as a person. And that needs to be at a high level, especially because it's going to kids who are vulnerable and open and spongy. And that is very, very important to me. And it's an honor to occupy that space. And I've been around long enough. Now those kids come to me at conventions or wherever I am and go, "Oh my God, you were the voice of my childhood," or "I grew up with you." I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you did. Yeah, that's cool." And oh my goodness, how much time has passed. Yeah.
but I love that because you were saying that we are just now kind of rediscovering a reverence for our elders, and I feel the same way about media that was traditionally seen as made for kids. I feel like maybe because of streaming, maybe that is helping people in sort of like what ebooks did for romance several years ago. I feel like streaming is kind of doing for stuff that's animated, stuff that's that kind of thing. I feel like people are
Yeah.
rediscovering how great some of these stories are. And anytime I hear, just as a writer that also writes for younger audiences, every time I hear somebody say, oh, this is a kids show, there's nothing in it for adults. I'm like, well, an adult wrote that. So it came from an adult that was living inside of an adult somewhere. So maybe there is something in there that could connect with you somehow. Maybe it's just a safer space to connect with some of those big emotions.
Well, that's the thing too. I think as creative professionals, I think we're all very aware, or most of us are very aware that that creativity comes from the young part of us, the child
Mm-hmm.
inside, the little, being that never had to grow up. I always say when you take on a creative career, you're becoming two people. You're the adult who goes and finds the opportunities, minds the books, et cetera, and then you're the kid, the 4-year-old. It's like, what if, and then creates, right? And I think that kid lives in all of us. I mean, modern psychology would point to that with all the sort of inner child work and all the recovery and for people who seek that and healing family legacies, et cetera. That kid is in there. Look at anybody who's pissed off in traffic. No actual grown up would behave that way. That is the tantrum of a 2-year-old with the vocabulary and license of a 30-year-olds. Like, we're all kids inside. Just look around when
Yep.
someone's mad, you know? or when something really gets you. And I think one of the great, overarching evolutions in our culture that is long overdue is inclusion. And it's inclusion of people.
Mhm.
It's racial inclusion. It's gender identity inclusion. It's orientation inclusion. It's all of sorts of inclusion. And I think that umbrella might even extend to our feelings and ourselves as just the who we are of who we are. We have greater
Mm.
permission in the world to truly be who we are, and that includes all the bits of us. I think there's a huge movement out there for men, you know, to really embrace all the bits of themselves. The vulnerable, like, I can't do it all. I'm not just for the more traditional cis men, I'm not just this male dude. I'm a person with feelings and vulnerabilities, et cetera. And I'm seeing more and more of that in pop culture. So it's like, yes, you're all of who you are as a human. You're all of who you are. And it's not just women and non-binary and are gay and lesbian and all of our ally, our community members in all the formerly less accepted places and less celebrated places who feel that way. It's you too. It's
Mm-hmm.
all you people who lived and benefited from the patriarchy. You have all these
Mm-hmm.
feelings too. So come on, it doesn't make you less of who you are. Feel your stuff. Be a kid. Have a good time. Let's watch the show. you know?
Exactly. If the Barbie movie taught us anything, it's that the patriarchy hurts men too.
And it taught
It
us so much.
it did. It did. So, the whole reason that I have this microphone right here is because I have had the pleasure of interviewing another voice actress for this show, Tawny Plattis. And I asked her if she had any questions for you. So this is what a voice
Oh my
actor would ask
gosh.
you if,
Oh.
I interviewed her for the show. I had a Blue Yeti microphone at the time because, of course, I did. And
Yes.
she ripped me a new one. Immediately purchased another one. Just I don't even think I got off I think I was ordering something new on Amazon. Anyways, she
Way to take
asks,
the coaching, by the way. Way to take the
yeah, oh,
coaching.
immediately. I was like, yes, ma'am, yes, and what should I buy? What credit card? Yeah, 100%.
Yes, yes.
So, because I'm curious, like I love talking to people who are experts in fields that nobody thinks about. And so I was curious. So she asks, when you're bringing a character to life, how much do you work with the creator or director of that project to find the voice, or is it dependent on the project?
It is dependent on the project. Some projects have teams that are vast and have a giant corporate influence with a big IP to protect, et cetera, et cetera. Some
Mm.
teams are small, loose, and on their feet and love to play. Some teams are medium-sized but have the boss who's deeply involved in bringing the project to life, and you get to play. I think of a game called BioShock Infinite, which was an incredible game, and Ken Levine created that, and we had an incredible time. We did the takes. I played one of the Lutece twins with Oliver Vicaire. And we got to do the unusual thing of recording at the same time, which doesn't often happen in
Ooh.
games. I know. And they put us in a studio with a piece of plexiglass between us so we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have, vocal bleed, which sounds really grisly, but it just means you can hear each other's sounds. Anyway, and so we could see each other and we just he's just such a great friend. He's so much fun. And we got to play off of each other. And so we went through the script and did it as written. And then Ken said the greatest thing any secure writer will ever say to his actors. All right, let's play. What do you guys want to do? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. We have freedom. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Let's do it. And so we played. We had, row, row, row you, but we had a great time making stuff up, singing the whole thing. Contrast that with a prop project like, like X-Men 97. Like I didn't want to touch a word in that script. It was vetted and re-vetted. We recorded and re-recorded, and it was so beautifully curated. There would be moments when I would play and moments when I didn't. Like, I was very careful with where I played, and it was important to me to honor Catherine's original Jean Grey and to bring what I had from the different other Jean Grey projects in there, and it was such a careful meld. And then compare that to something like, say, a BioWare game, which would be Knights of the Old Republic or Mass Effect or something like that, where, for example, in Mass Effect, you've got I'm the female troop commander Shepard. I'm thinking of Knights of the Old Republic at the same time. Female Commander Shepard and Mark Meer is male Commander Shepard. And because of the technical requirements of the game, because there is a
Mm.
massive, massive engine and team, and the actors are a small piece of the technical equation, and we're happening concurrently to other production. You can't deviate a punctuation mark from what's in that script. You have to be on because I was thinking of Star Wars: The Old Republic online because we have, I believe there's 6 different options. I may be wrong, but I think there's about 6 different options for the player character. I'm the female trooper. There's a male trooper. There's a female Jedi, male Jedi. Like there's all these different iterations, and we have to all match up because all those words have to sync in perfectly with the rest of game production. It depends on the project. And then also there is honestly the matter of people's creative levels of security. People who are very, very secure in their artistry have room for others to come in and play. People who feel a little bit less seated in themselves tend to kind of control more. And yeah, I mean, that's a terrible generalization. It could be technical requirements. There are also behavioral factors. Some people have more freedom to play. Some people have less. And it's not my job to comment or judge on who does and doesn't. It's my job to serve them in the lane that I'm given. That is what I'm there for.
What's your process of finding that character? I mean, obviously with something like an X-Men 97, you have 5 seasons of previous work that you go back and listen to. And I suppose that it's just a lot of standing around in a room, talking to yourself, trying to, I am Phoenix. But what's your process of finding, I suppose, both an original character and one that you're having to kind of dupe?
It always comes out of the writing. Everything is in the script. Everything is it's in the script and in the ethers. My particular process, I was I went to a fine arts high school and we did the Uta Hagen and the Stanislavski and I know the Meisner and we did all this Shakespeare and the training and the training.
I
and the
too
training.
am a theater child. I don't know if you can tell.
I can see. I love the masks on the wall. They're so great. Yes, they're gorgeous, actually. I love the way you've got them arranged.
Thanks.
So I have all that classical training. And I used to do things like I remember back when I lived in Birmingham and I would commute to Atlanta when I started working in film and TV, I would get a script and I would sit down. I had the beautiful fortune of playing Rod Steiger's daughter in a movie of the week. Rod Steiger was an Academy Award-winning actor. Mm-hmm. Incredible. He was a force. And when I got to work with him, I want to say he was well in, at least in his 60s. So dude knew his lane. And for example, that script, this is how the evolution has happened for me of creating a character. I got the script. I read the script. I read all the descriptions, and I had that let me get it right thing, which is such a prison, but it's where we all start, And then I was taught about subtext and all this, and I had a notebook, and I wrote an entire backstory for this character, pages and pages of writing in a notebook. And then I had a notebook out to the side when I read my lines, and I would write all my subtext out, like everything I was thinking but not saying between every line, like writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. Yeah. And then I learned my lines, and then I was very ready for production.
Yeah.
Oh, I learned such a good lesson. I think I was all of like 19.
So much prep work.
Oh my God. And I show up on set and I rehearse the scene with Rod. And it feels almost blasphemous to just call him by his first name. And the scene is, when I first see him, I come running down the stairs and I give him a hug. And then I tell him how I'm mad at him because of blah, blah, blah. And so we blocked it. And I come running down the stairs and he gives me a hug and we do the scene. And then we go to film. We go to our first take. I come running down those stairs. Instead of giving me the hug, he turns his left shoulder to me and body blocks me. And I go spinning off of him because you just poof, right into him. And I was like, what? I'm thinking, that's not what we... And thankfully, some very intelligent part of my brain went, stay with it. And I just stayed in the scene. And I said everything I had to say to him because I was pissed. And I was like, what a gift he just gave me. He taught me 2 things. He taught me you do all your planning and then you throw it away.
Yeah.
And you show up and you do and you deal with what is in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was to the point where I showed up on that set and I was like, do I walk across this electrical cord because I might get in trouble? That's how much of a get it right friggin' good girl I was trying to be. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I very much resonate with that.
Yes.
I'm like,
And
okay, I'm here. I know you invited me here. I know that I'm not an imposter. I know I'm supposed to be here, but I'm going to be on my best. I'm going to make you just so glad you invited me. I'm going to be the best one. I'm going to get an A. I'm going to get an A plus.
Oh my God. And then we don't show up. I mean, yes, you don't want to go kicking electrical cords, but it was extraordinary. So now what that has evolved to, and this goes back to a point you made earlier. I'll never forget this. I think I was 27. I was living in LA in the side of a house. I rented these 2 bedrooms without a real kitchen or anything. I was just dirt poor. And I was working, but I was lamenting that I wasn't good enough as an actor. My ego was just having its little temper tantrum field day. And fortunately, that same intelligent, still small voice got really loud for a second and just said, just stop. Just stop. Just shut up. I was like, okay. It said, in 20 years, if you keep showing up each day and doing the work, then you can render an opinion about your skills. I don't want to hear a word till then. I was like, okay. Okay. So I kind of listened. I listened more over the years as I remembered what I had been told by the ethers. And sure enough, that process evolves over time. And when you repeat something, I repeated, it's like learning to play, a sport, like learning to play tennis or pickleball or soccer or something. You very slowly, like my kid is trying to teach me how to juggle a soccer ball. I'm like, I can bounce it once off my leg. Yay, I win today. But if I just keep doing that, in 2 years, I'll be able to juggle a soccer ball. Woohoo. So it's the similar progression. Like I'm like, okay, hold the ball up, drop the ball. Good. Okay, again, look at the script. Who am I? What do I want? What is the writer saying? What is everyone else saying about me? What's the overriding theme of the story? And what does my heart say? What does my gut say? What are the ethers sending me as intuitive experiences of what humanity might need from this particular story, no matter how large or small it is? And then just take the risk to be wrong and go for it. Just go for it. You're not going to die. Just go for it. So,
I love that idea of doing all the prep work and then throwing it out, because so often, authors will have the conversation amongst each other like, okay, I did all my plotting, I did all my planning, I did all my outlining, I know exactly what needs to happen, I know when it needs to happen. And what's so funny is you'll get to writing your little book, and then the characters don't want to do that thing. And when you say that to other people that are not writers, they say, I'm sorry, aren't you the author? What do you mean your characters don't want to do that thing? And it's like, it's not that I'm like, have a mental disorder. It's just that you get into a situation and you know what needs to happen, but then you start living inside of this character as you're writing them and you realize, I don't think they would do this way. I don't know that
yes.
that's why they would do that. I know that it needs to happen. I don't know that that's why it needs to happen, though. And then suddenly it's, then you find a more organic way to it. But yeah, that happens in so many places. And I love that you're saying this, because even somebody at, your level can say, listen, you do all this prep work, you come prepared, and then you have to throw it out. That's something for you to keep in the back of your mind as to why you're doing something. But like, you still
Yes.
need freedom to create art.
Yes. Art, because it's about the authentic human experience in the moment. We want people to connect. Like if you've ever watched a movie where you, or played a game, or, watched in a cartoon, anything where you see people having an intense experience, you're like, oh my God, that was such a great, yes, that's a cool experience. Look at how intense, look how incredible that was. That's a performer who did their work and they came there, blah, blah, blah. And the whole production went, we are keeping this on track. And then you
Mhm.
watch the projects where you see a scene and you can't speak and
Mm.
you don't know why. And they just surrendered to something in the moment. I mean, if we go to X-Men, there was some stuff that happens at the end of the 3rd episode. I couldn't even talk.
Mm.
I had the Kleenex out. I was just like, oh, Jesus. And my character, Jean couldn't cry but it was everything to fight back those tears. And I did not go in there to go after the emotion. This was a huge thing I learned from Jeff Corey, beautiful, beautiful actor who was blacklisted in the McCarthy era. So he did sci-fi before it was cool. And he was a genius. And he was teaching a class in Atlanta. I think I was like 20. And this actor was up there on stage emoting his brains out, and he was executing his emotion plan. I was like, oh my God,
Mm.
look at his access. That's incredible. I wish I could do that. Oh my God. And Jeff interrupts his scene. Middle of the scene, goes, God damn it, people. And everybody jumps in their seat, me included. And he's sorry, I'm swearing because he swore. And he said, real human beings do not set out to feel things. They set out to do things in the course of which they have feelings they do not want to have. I don't want to see your goddamn emotions all over my stage. And that's what I learned about cover. And cover is the veneer that we present to the world of how we want to be seen. And it's not just our ego. Yeah, it's not just our ego that wants to be seen that way. Some of it is, but some of it's just we need it to feel safe. Like I need to feel I need you to see me as competent, because if you see that I'm incompetent, you might come in and then I have to have boundaries when I can't have boundaries right now. And I just want you to stay out there. So I'm super competent. Don't need anything. Bye. Because I'm terrified. or any other number. Like, I need you to see me as funny because funny makes sure people stay. Funny makes sure I'm loved. Funny, I'm funny. I'm fine.
I remember acting with people like that back when I was on stage doing things,
Yeah.
and you could always tell when you were acting with somebody who had spent not just hours but days crying in a mirror to make sure that their face comported in a very specific way so that they still like cried pretty.
Oh
And
my
it's just
God.
like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not feeling a single bit of that, because the thing is, sometimes,
No.
like you were doing, like you talked about a few moments ago, how you're in that scene, and one time your characters want to hug, but another time maybe the shoulder, maybe it feels more right to put the shoulder out, and then you have to react in a different way. And that's how you keep plays alive. Stage
Yes.
theater is all about keeping that play alive, and sometimes it's just
Yeah.
a slightly different vibe that night, and you have to be able to run with it. And sometimes it is sad, and sometimes it's like bittersweet, and those are different emotions. And sometimes it's a sense of loss, and that's a different emotion. And sometimes, so when we are so committed to the plan, sometimes we don't
We
feel
disconnect.
things. Yeah.
Yes, we disconnect. And this is all about connection. It's all about connection. Like, we play these things to connect to our own humanity. We watch these things to connect to each other. We watch these things to connect to a common human experience. And if the writer hasn't allowed that common human experience to flow through, obviously with coherence, et cetera, and things I don't understand because I'm not a writer, and if the actor hasn't shown up, is more married to their ideas than they are to having an authentic human experience, then you're missing connection.
Mm-hmm. So the Guinness Book of World Records awarded you something
Yes.
for the most prolific voice actor in video games. Do I have that
Female.
right?
Female.
Female.
Most
Okay. Well,
prolific
see,
female. Yes.
I didn't
Everybody
know if it
gets
was
that,
split
and I
like
always
that.
wanna go, "Steve has the one for the dude, Steve Bloom, and I have the one for
Okay.
the women." Yes. And they
Dang
never
it.
awarded it, actually. I just found out about it on Twitter. I think Steve got a plaque and stuff, but, this was a little while back when women didn't, we've only quite recently gotten
Justice for,
a piece.
oh my God, justice for, hashtag justice for Jennifer.
I'll actually spend that capital for justice for larger causes, but I will totally take that. Yes.
Yeah, listen. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can ask for your plaque. If a beer cut, listen, they have plaque money.
I
They
know,
can send you
right?
your plaque.
They have beer money.
I am now upset. So, what about video games? I feel like video games specifically do not get. I mean, it animated shows, yeah, people treat them like for kids, but video games for some reason have an even more like maligned
Yeah,
place in society. I feel like even, and what people don't realize is they're bigger than the film industry, like
much
by a
bigger.
lot, by like a
Yeah.
lot, a lot, a lot. So I'm just curious, like, one, what draws you to video games? Two, maybe how'd you get your start? Because I'm sure there's going to
Yeah.
be some voice actors that want some tips from you
Yes.
here in this,
Yes, yes,
listening to this
yes.
episode. But
Yes.
also, what about them do you think draws so many people to playing?
So many things. I think they get dismissed because they originally started as tech. Everybody thinks Atari. People are a little behind the curve. They don't understand viscerally the experiences of playing games. People who are now decision makers, producers, directors, starting to be executives understand.
Mhm,
To me, I believe video games drive much of the engine of pop culture.
mhm.
Look at commercials, look at how they're done, look at how, movies are like, it's all going after the games. We work out the engine, you guys take it and make the mega bucks budget things with it. I got into them because I wanted to buy a house.
Yes, yes.
Because I was not even allowed to watch cartoons growing up, much less, play games, and I didn't have time. I was that nerd that just read books and played with my dog, and dreamt of having a horse one day. Then I always dreamt of having a house. And so I was working in a lot in animation and commercials and stuff in LA, and games came along. And I think my first game I ever did was the game associated with Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego. And it was a very odd experience, to be honest. I'm in the session and I'm used to, classically trained actor. I'm like, okay, what's my moment before? What's my motivation? Who am I talking to? What do I want from them? And it's a list of the names of flags of countries. And I was like, so a couple times I was like, okay, so who am I talking? And they're like, you're saying the country name. I was like, okay. And I'm doing it and they're like, because we need the names of the countries. I'm like, okay, how is it going to be used? It's going to be in the game. Okay. And it's about 3 of those questions. I'm like, I am gumming up the works right now. Just figure it out. And that's when I learned that in games, you got to come up with your own moment before, your own who you're talking to, your own why you're saying it. You just make it up on the spot and just jump. And so I did. And there's a tremendous difference between a game session and an animation session. And this was like 1995, maybe 96. We hadn't even done Metal Gear yet. And this was before, I don't think we'd done Baldur's Gate yet. This was before they were a big deal, long before. But I've been very comfortable being highly uncool my entire life. I really trained well for it as a teenager and a little kid. I was never cool. And so animation sessions are by the union contract, because as a union actor, they're 4 hours, and it's like a radio play. We're taking turns sharing the story. And a game session is a 4-hour session, and it's a one-person show, and you might get a couple potty breaks in there. Go refresh your water and come back. It is sometimes I'll come out of them dizzy because the intent of focus, because we also record out of sequence. We'll record a line from the middle, then the beginning, then the end, then back to, a third of the way through, and boop, 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 because you're recording according to what tech needs. Tech needs these lines done now because they're creating this part of the engine right now. Tech needs that done right now. So, okay, so it's out of sequence. It was exhausting. And a lot of my peers were like, no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, I'll do it. I want to buy a house. I'll do it. And I fell in love with the teams, and I fell in love with it's my people. It's the people on the outside, on the fringe. Well, they're not on the outside anymore. They're way on the inside. And I just love it. I think that even as a parent, my kid loves to game. He doesn't play role-playing games. He plays other stuff. And I do worry about screen time, etc. But I created a startup a couple years ago with my sister and our friend Bill. And Bill is our dev who builds it. It's acting.skillshub.life for people who want to do what I do. And he, I was talking to him about Bill about this one day, and I was like, my kid, he's gaming. He goes, just let it go. He goes, I did it. I turned out great. I'm like, yeah, you did turn out kind of awesome. And he goes, they're developing, and he listed all these different skills that you develop in that process. And I'm like, oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's make sure he gets outside. Let's make sure he does all these other things. But there's a lot of benefit to it. And the last thing I'll say is that when people sign on to a game, if you look at something like Mass Effect, you've got 60 hours. I don't even know how many hours you've got in these stories with these people. And the writing is so brilliant in so many games. I'm part of a game we did a Kickstarter for it called The Long Dark. And Jesus, the writing's beautiful and the music's beautiful. And you live in those stories far longer than you do in a movie or a TV show. And you co-create nowadays in so many games because you're making choices that affect the narrative. You're deeply involved. And you're discovering, you're not weirding out over some piece of tech. You're discovering pieces of your own humanity. You're developing skills of all kinds. I was at a convention in Chicago years ago, and this woman came up to me. I think she was probably in her early 30s, and she'd had a stroke. And her very healthy looking woman, but it happens. And her physiotherapist suggested that she find a game to play, a role-playing game, and pick up a controller in order to gain her fine motor skills again. So she picked up Mass Effect, and that's how she regained her full, fine motor skills. I was like, what? I recorded a video
amazing.
for her and sent it to the team. I was like, you guys have to show this to.
That's incredible. So few voice actors become recognizable household names. And I have to say that when I told people I was interviewing you, those who were in the know were very immediately deeply relevant. It was pretty much like I had just said, I'm interviewing Angelina Jolie on Monday.
Oh my God.
So we have seen stunt actors begin to get their due. We just saw The Fall Guy happen earlier this year. There's been a push to make sure that stunt actors maybe have a category at the Oscars and that kind of thing. It really giving them their due. Do you hope the same thing happens culturally
Oh,
for voice actors?
absolutely, I do. I will say my heart's a little heavy. I think that they're going to start making the money they should make, and that we're going to start getting the recognition we should get. And I certainly hope that I'm part of cutting the trail for those who come after. I don't
Mhm.
know that I'm going to directly benefit from that, but I think my place has always been to kick down doors for someone else.
Mm.
I've told this story before. When I first moved to LA, this is in the mid 90s, I was auditioning for commercials, and they would, I'd see the copy, and I'd be reading for woman number 4, testimonial number 3, and then I'd see announcer. And I'd been in this business for a few years before I moved to LA, and I knew announcer was the repeat business. You come back,
Mm.
you do several spots, like that's going to get me my house. And I said, "Can I read for announcer?" And they're like, "No, they want a man." And I said, "I know. Can I read anyway?" And they're like, "Oh." And then I kept doing it. No, seriously, can I? No, you don't have to send it. Just let me read. Just let me read it. Come on, come on, come on, come on. And I did that for a long time. And I kept pestering them and pestering them. I never got mad, because you got to be the happy pest. And they started sending it. And then I started booking. And by the year, I think it's 2000, 2002, I could not turn on the TV or radio without hearing myself. I was like, boom, door down, next, and then Mass Effect came out, and it was the first game where you had all the same choices as a woman as you do as a man. And I was like, boom, door down, next. It was so, 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 so much fun. That's my joy. So I don't know that I'm going to see the benefits of it. I would love that universe. I welcome it if it is on my path, but I am determined that it will happen. And I will do whatever I can.
I feel like some with some of these animated projects becoming much bigger, there is buzz that your recent show X-Men 97 is up for some Emmys, and there's a lot of buzz around the animated world in recent years, and a lot of conversation happening around giving voice actors their due, but also of that intersection of A-list movie stars. Whenever they don't have anything else to do, they sign on to a movie, and maybe the pitfalls of some of that, because
Yeah.
maybe they're not so great at it. I did. I did. Do you have
Yeah.
thoughts on
I
that
do. I do.
intersection?
Well, the funny thing is we actually refer to that as kind of stunt casting. And
Yeah.
what
Mario.
yeah,
Mm.
some of them have contributions to make. I mean, Mark Hamill is our own Mark Hamill. I met Mark
Yes.
back in the mid 90s when we worked together on the Spider-Man cartoon. And this is before he had, the Star Wars Renaissance happened. And I was blown away by what a brilliant voice actor he is. He is our Mark. That's how I see him. I feel very possessive of him. He's voiceover's Mark. And they get to borrow him for a while, but they better treat him well. So people like Mark, they know what they're doing. I mean, there are some actors who are actors. Most of the British actors are just unbelievable. Not to generalize, but I'm consistently blown away. But many actors don't necessarily make the transition. I remember, I'll never forget being at the Spike Awards, and first time I was nominated for an award was the Spike Awards, the Game Awards in 2010, and it was for Best Female Performance. It was for Commander Shepard, and I'll never forget this. This is the way voice actors are treated and how the stunt casting actors are treated. And Tricia Helfer, who is lovely and a wonderful actress, was nominated in the same category, and I waited through the whole ceremony. And I had a 6-month-old at home, and I needed to get home because, when you're still nursing mom, you're like, oh, I got to go. And I went to the stage manager and I said, hey, how long till they announce the winner in our category? Because I do have a little bit of a time limit. And he said, oh, no, we recorded the winner earlier today. And it was a TV person. It was a TV personality. And so there was a very dismissive attitude toward TV actors, but it's beginning to change. I mean, Rob Paulson has won an Emmy. I mean, look at Maurice LaMarche and Eric Bauza and just all the wonderful voice actors who were up in that scene so well and so beautifully. And it's going to happen. It's just a question of time. And the truth is, I don't like to spend mental energy on things that piss me off, because I do get very
Sure.
pissed off. I get very pissed. My anger flare is, whoa, it's big and high. So I go, okay, can't do anything about it today, so I'm going to let it go.
But I do think it's a fair question to ask. I mean, I do think it's a fair topic, because I do think that there are going to be people that listen to this that are a big champion and fan of voice actors and of the skill and craft and decades that it takes to build that skill set. And if we are going to talk about justice for people in the entertainment industry that are not served, but are the voice of your favorite character. You just don't know who they are, and they're not
Yeah.
given their money, their time, their due, or the accolades. Like, if we're going to talk about that, we do kind of have to talk about the fact that there is this disparity out there. Like, A-list
And
movie star has time off because of a strike or something, and it's like, oh well, I can do this. I'll
yeah,
do that. I've got some time in between Marvel projects.
or beloved voice actor is replaced in a role they've been doing for 7 seasons because they wanted to save a little money.
Or the flip side, beloved voice actors being replaced for AI, which is now another way that on that maybe lower end of folks that might be getting more consistent work doing audiobook narration or some of those
Right.
smaller roles that aren't A-list.
Yes.
They're not coming to Netflix anytime soon, but they're that consistent work that what you called yourself on social media the other day, a
Mhm.
workaday actor, I think is what you
Mhm.
said. I'm a
Yes.
workaday actor.
Yes,
Those
yes.
workaday voice acting jobs, we now have the looming threat of AI. Amazon just put out their AI module where you can have, upload your indie book and have an AI voice,
Yeah.
I don't know, beep boop at
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's tough because AI is a tool, and the tool can either break a window or open a door. And
Mm-hmm.
how we use that tool is gonna be very, very, very and it's gonna come back to bite us if we don't get some ethics in place really quickly. There are 2 things I'm always moved to tell people what they can do and how they can regain their power. Number 1, there's an organization called navavoices.org, N-A-V-A voices dot or Nava, I think it's either nava.org or navavoices.org. Nava is the organization. It's the National Association of Voice Actors. It's a North American organization. They're open to membership around the world. For North American actors, you can actually get group health insurance rates if you're a member of Nava.
Wow.
Oh, it's
That's
mind-blowing.
amazing.
And they are fighting their butts off for all of us. They just spent a week in Washington lobbying Congress people. They are at skillshub.life. We're promoting and supporting them and educating our members about like how can you advocate for yourself? How can you support yourself? How can it's important that we do a couple things, that we stay informed, that we stay hopeful and proactive. And hope isn't just, I know it's going to be fine. It's no, I'm informed. Here's what I do every day to inform myself. I take concrete action. I have a little rider. There's the Nava rider. It's the AI rider you can put with any contract you get signed. Any work contract you just put. It's a 1-page rider. It's been vetted by multiple layers of attorneys. Nava has paid for it. And you just attach that to your work, or just make sure there's a clause in there they can't lift your voice for AI. There's some of these casting sites that have terrible practices that will pull actors' files and demos they upload to use them for AI. So stay informed. Look at the fine print. We all have to adult, yes, but now we can't afford to not adult in this area. So stay informed, and also use your intent. See it as done. Train that reticular activation system of your brain, that pattern recognition system, to see like, oh, it's going to start to notice, oh, I could sign that petition. Oh, I can vote for that thing. Oh, that representative's supporting us. Oh, yeah. And take those tiny actions, because those little tiny, you as an individual, you're not going to stop AI. None of us are going to stop AI. You're not going to control AI. Us as a group, we are 1000% capable of influencing AI for the better. We have to make those individual choices to do it.
This would normally be the first question that I ask you, but I wanted to give X-Men fans their moment right up top, me especially. How'd you get your start? I mean, you've had such a career. Where'd you start it?
I started it in Birmingham, Alabama, at a little place called Boutwell Studios. I was working at a place called Leo Tiscelli Productions. Actually, I worked at a plant store. And one day, the studio, Leo Tiscelli, came in scouting a location, and I was one of those super hard workers, like we talked about earlier. I'm going to make it work. And I worked really hard, and they sort of plucked me out of the plant store and went, come to work with us. And I worked for about a week, and I was like, this is really cool. Do we get paid for this too? And he's like, we don't work for free. And I was like, oh, sweet. So my first boyfriend's mom, Jane Trexel, lovely woman, she did voiceovers. And I was like, what is that? And she told the studio about me because they were looking for a Valley girl. And I could totally do a Valley girl. And I went next door and I did one line as a Valley girl. and they paid me 30 or $35 because the video studio was right next door to the audio studio. And I was like, you just paid me what for what? And I was hooked because money, my second dad used to call me the little capitalist piglet because I was always all about the money. But my flavor of capitalism was I would make a business plan to make all these like macrame plant hangers, and I would buy my materials and I knew my cost, and I would make the hangers and I'd put in the time, and then I go, oh, just take it. It's fine. You know, that was my brand of capitalism. Probably still is. Anyway, I was hooked by the fact that I got paid because for me, money represented like security and freedom, which were safety and freedom, were two things I just didn't have. And so I bugged the guys at the studio, Greg and Courtney, to teach me how to do it. And the way I did that was I was like, I'm going to make a demo. Those listening out there who want to do this, do not do it this way. Study and learn skills first, then make your demo. 2 years of learning. Then talk to somebody and see if you're ready to make your demo. Please don't do it the way I did it. Please do not do this. But there were no classes then in my defense. So I made my demo over and over and over, and it was terrible every 3 months. I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. That was a waste of money. But I demoed my way into understanding the craft, and I worked, and I then took that demo and went door to door to ad agencies, cold calling them in a little suit when I was still in my teens on a schedule. It was nauseating. I hated it. But I built a business. And by the time I was in college, I was full-time acting. I went over to Atlanta to increase my opportunities in commercials, auditioned for my first film, booked it, booked the next one. I was like, this acting makes sense to me. And then I moved to LA for film and TV, worked a couple times a year. Can't live off that. So I made a voiceover demo tape just to get some money coming in. And within a month, I had my first audition for a cartoon series, and I booked it, and it was Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego. So that's my whole origin story right there.
Fast forward to now, you're a veteran of the industry. You are trailblazer, iconic A-lister in the industry. So I feel like you have some interesting tips and tricks,
I do.
and secret hacks for keeping your voice from dying after so many hours. The closest that I've ever been to this was I did. Simon and Schuster had me do the audiobook for my last book with them. And I did it right over there in that corner.
Oh.
With my little blue Yeti.
Yes.
And they kept telling me, oh, you sound great. You sound so good. And I was dying. Yeah. Like, 3 or 4 hours in, like just dying. And I was like, why am I dying? I podcast. I'm the theater kid. Like, I know how to warm up. I know how to like make my voice. How do you stay going for hours on end?
You have to train into it. I have only done 3 audiobooks. One is Christopher Paolini's To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. And then such a brilliant book. And then the prequel to that came out after, which was incredible. And then the audiobook, Scholastic audiobook that went along with Overwatch, Ash's backstory. And so I remember audiobook sessions when they're formally done are like 6 hours or more. And I said, I know what I'm trained for. I'm trained for 4-hour blocks. So I can work in a 4 to 5 hour block. So know what you're trained for and work into it. For example, this morning, I haven't been out on my bike in a while. I've been going to the gym and doing the recumbent bike, but I'm like, that's a totally different body position. I was like, let's go hard. And I was like, don't be dumb. Just do a short ride. And sure enough, I get home and like 2 hours later, my rhomboid's like, I don't like you. And I was like, oh, I'm glad I didn't go hard today. I have to train into it. So train into it. Hydration. I've been sipping this tea ever since we got in here. I love, one of my greatest cheats is hot water. And you can some people put lemon in it, but that gives me this weird dry edge in my throat. Some teas are great. Some teas aren't. I don't do honey because I really don't do sugar, but find a tea that works for you, that keeps your voice hydrated. The warm water will keep you like warmed up and fluid and loose. I stand. I do not sit. I do not sit.
I'm standing
Yes,
now. I have a
yes,
standing that this has been so much better for me in all way. Like I write better because I'm up and I'm paying attention and I've got my
yes,
screens here and I've got my
yes,
research and my book
yes.
there. And also I've taken to just doing podcasting here because I'm up. I sound better. My back doesn't
It's
hurt. It's great.
it's so great. I do actually force myself to sit for interviews because I'll bounce all over the place otherwise, which is very distracting. So but warm into it. Also, I'm a huge proponent of, for me, voice acting or voice performance of any kind, you need some kind of acting foundation. Highly recommend improv training because then you're not worried if you don't know what's going to happen. You can think on your feet,
Mhm.
and some sort of singing training. We brought on a new coach to Skills Hub this morning, this guy, Sebastian Cruteau, who does like extremes, like heavy metal vocals and like monster sounds and stuff. And he made me deeply question my own knowledge of vocal health because he has distinctions I never even thought of. So get training from somebody who knows how to preserve your voice. I started singing in clubs and rock clubs when I was like 15. And yes, that was not legal. And I don't tell my kid. And I,
Don't worry, it's just you and me. Nobody's going to listen to this.
oh, just wait. I went to an opera teacher before we had like, one of the longer gigs in town, and every other singer would lose their voice. So I ran to an opera teacher as soon as we got that gig, and I trained hard. And I still to this day use things that teacher taught me to preserve my voice. But don't force yourself past what you know you can do in a healthy way. You will build up stamina over time, and in an audiobook, you will have time to build stamina. Take breaks, make sure you're breathing well. And also, this has really struck me lately, listening to older people. I love listening to people farther down the road than me. And I was listening to somebody on YouTube the other day, and I could hear his words slurring, and he's very sharp. And I know he moves his body, but I was like, oh, there are all these tiny muscles in your mouth that we don't train and we don't use. And the older you get, I think the less you talk because you realize, you should talk less a long time ago. And, but also maybe you spend more time alone. Maybe you're in your own groove. So you're actually not using those muscles. So pay attention to the muscles in your mouth and what they're doing. I love tongue twisters as a warm up, not to say them fast, but to over enunciate them. Like, Theophilus Thistle, the successful thistle sifter. By doing it super exaggerated and slowly, I get every little tiny muscle in my mouth moving versus Theophilus Thistle, the successful thistle sifter. Like, not much is moving when I do that. It sounds fast and aggressive.
There's a purpose to the what to do to die today at a minute.
That's
All of those,
exactly.
they have a purpose.
That's right. We don't question
It's not to
why.
speed run.
Yes, we don't question why Messi trains or why Michael Jordan trained, or we don't question that. Those are performances. This is a particular type of athleticism. It's just very focused in this part of the body. You got to train for it, and you got to hydrate.
Is there any bad advice that's out there that you keep
Oh.
hearing and you're like, why is this out there? It's 2024. Why are we still why do you all think that drinking, I don't know, drain sludge is going to give your voice what's like some bad advice that
Oh my
keeps
God. Anything
floating
packaged.
around out there?
Packaged food, terrible. Anything that's packaged, don't do it. Let's see. They want to hear this. If anybody's talking about a voice audition or like what you should do to get into the industry, they want to hear this. No, they want to hear you. This is the age of authenticity. Have the courage to be you. Have the courage to quote unquote do it wrong. Have the courage. Was it Caroline Lawrence booked Sandy the squirrel in SpongeBob SquarePants? She was the only one to come in and do it with a crazy Southern accent and do some weird, wild take on it. And they're like, whoa, that wasn't in the description. We love that. Book them. Be yourself. Because the truth is, you're going to be far better at that than anything else. And if the puzzle piece that you are doesn't fit the puzzle they're making, they're sure going to remember your puzzle piece because it stood out. Because you can't deny it. When somebody's being all of who they are, it cuts through like a clarion call. And if it's not right for now, but it's coming. It's coming. Your turn is coming. There is plenty to go around. Competition is crap. Take the time it takes. This instant gratification thing is going to kill us all. Let's just not, shall we?
Do you collect people? when you hear an interesting voice, or when you hear
Yes.
somebody get real mad and it starts getting real funny in a line, or do you hear an interesting accent, or do you
Oh,
do you
yes.
collect them and hold on to them and hope that one day you can use
Oh.
that?
Oh my gosh, I was on a train in England. I think I was on my way to a convention somewhere. I was taking a day trip somewhere, and this woman, she the accent, it was like this, and everything she said sounded like it was a great secret. She's like, so I went to the store, and what they had was they had strawberries. And I was like, oh my God, just the
Love
presentation, like it
that.
was a great secret. And the heaviness of her voice and the drama of it all. It's fascinating. And I was like, oh my, and I literally got out my voicemail when I kind of leaned over. I was like, dude, and just captured this woman. So I was like, oh my God, I got to remember that. But, I studied with Charlie Adler and Chris Zimmerman, one of the first classes I ever took. Charlie would say, when you pass somebody in a parking lot, and you hear something, just copy them. He said, you might end up in a fight, but just copy them so you remember their voice. I'm like, you can get away with that. I'll do it silently and do it later in the car. But, and there was an expression called steal with love. Like I could copy,
Mhm.
you could do a character and I could
Yeah.
copy that character like verbatim, but it would still be different.
Yes. Oh,
I
yeah,
got to,
100%.
I got to a Rosie O'Donnell through trying to do Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I ended up with Rosie, which is not Rosie, but it's some other character that I call Rosie,
Yeah.
and I use her all the time. Yeah.
Miss Jennifer Hale, I am coming up on time with you, and I want to be very respectful. Do you have anything else? Is there anything nitty gritty, some weird, awful part of the job that nobody ever thinks is going to be part of this job, getting into it, that nobody ever thinks to ask about, that you're just like, nobody ever asks about this part. I want to tell people about this part.
Deep isolation.
Mm.
This is a deeply isolating career. We want to be, we do in voice acting, like we used to go places in the before times for castings, etc. And
Mhm.
look, COVID gave us a lot of freedom. I bolted out of LA and I live on Vancouver Island and I'm happy. I love it here. But I don't go to the casting houses anymore. And many, many, many of us don't. It's kind of a rare occurrence. So we read here in the booth alone. That's why community is so important. Find your people, find your place, find your safe space that you can play. Get your head game in order, because you will, we go in the booth, we pour our heart out. We'll spend hours, sometimes days on an audition, especially in the beginning. And you pour your soul into it and you're really proud of it, or you're hopeful about it. And this is what you hear back. Or if you're in the room with them, this is what you hear back. Thank you. That's it. And it can be soul crushing. So like I'm teaching, this Skill Hub's the only place I'm really teaching. I'm teaching my class for new people on their starting this weekend. And one of the things I will build into that fabric, and I ask everybody, wherever you get this, build it into your fabric, is an automatic mechanism for self-validation. When I have them practice their stuff, I make them say 3 things they did well when they listen back to it, and 1 thing to work on. 3 to 1, 3 to 1. You must build that muscle for internal validation, and you must get a grip on your critic. I don't know a lot of people who went into acting because they had a fabulous childhood. So I think there are some. There definitely are some. I know a few, but the majority, we have a more, colorful, chaotic situation. And for some of us, that can end up
Becoming other people is easier than being me.
Yeah, but you can come out of that with some pretty trash self-talk. And in this career, that will take you out. Imagine, like, I think I saw an interview with Bryce Dallas Howard the other day, who had the great fortune of having not just a father who was an actor, but a grandmother who was a very successful working actress. And her grandmother told her, 64 auditions, 1 out of every 64 you will book. So she started auditioning and she booked number 49. And her agent was like, how did you keep the hope? She's like, oh, my grandma warned me. I'm like, oh, thank God. I mean, I know one of our coaches, Skills Hub, Brian Palermo, he is a brilliant improv actor. He's one of the ones who you'd be like, oh, I've seen that guy everywhere. And his contemporaries are Maya Rudolph and Will Ferrell. Like Tina Fey, he was like, they were his crew coming up. Phil Lamar, like they all know each other. Brian tracked and he's open about this when he teaches, he tracked his success rate with his auditions, and it was 5%. And with a 5% success rate, he bought a house in LA. He supported his family. He thrived. So I can't track numbers. That will shut me down. and also do it your way. When people say this is how you do it, run away. Well, pause. Listen to your gut first. Take the pieces that work for you and then go on. Do not force yourself into another mold. You'll make yourself so unhappy. And the thing I want everybody to know is the most important thing in all of this is you, your heart. Are you fulfilled? You might not be happy every minute. That's a really tall order. But are you generally pretty content? Are you feeling like you're aligned? Are you listening to yourself and your own intuition? Above all, whether it's cheering you on or calling you out, maybe appropriately, not abusing you, we've talked about that, but it is a tough career. It's a tough career. A creative career is very, very isolating. So have your people, mind your head trash, and be really rigorous with yourself about treating yourself well.
That's amazing advice. And it goes across all creative fields. I need everybody to know that being an author, being a writer, like most people's first novel is not the first novel they sell, if they ever sell a novel. Like most books don't sell. If you do get to publication, you're in like the top 5% or 2% of all writers. Like most writers never sell anything. And if they do, most books don't earn out. Like it's just this whole, like, I just, like what you're saying, it's that it so few things hit. So you just have to enjoy the process of doing it. You have to be in love with the craft of it, and you have to be in love with other people that do it as well, because they're in the same boat as you are.
Yes.
And what I've gotten to learn from getting to do this show and getting to kind of get to mingle with people who are way far above me in the social stratosphere is that it doesn't really ever change. Doesn't really matter what level you get to. It's all the same hustle. It's all the same. I mean, their thing just hit a little bigger, but it was still, just a spark. They have to do it again.
Yes,
You have
that
to do
was
it
a
again.
blip. Save your money. Save your money.
Save your money.
Yeah, you'll be in fashion and out of fashion. It often has nothing to do with you. Save your money. And we conflate social strata with value. And they're not the same. I just was reading, what is it? Rest is Resistance. I'm trying to remember her name. She runs the NAP ministry, and she's amazing. And it talks about how our value, she has this incredible thesis, which is that human beings got valued for their productivity during slavery. How much could they output? How much can this body output? How much can this earn for me? And that mentality has now been blown out to everything. How much can we produce? Like if you love to write and you've never sold a book, that doesn't devalue you as a writer. No. You are a writer. If you love to act in community theaters, what's happened for you, you are an actor. And your money might come from somewhere else. That is a freedom in and of itself. It might not be what culture has trained you to dream of, but these things that we're wanting, how much of it did you make up as a kid, and how much were you socialized to think you ought to do?
Jennifer Hale, thank you so much for your time. I'm
thank you.
Very aghast. Oh. I had to ask friends. I was like, is it not chill of me to wear the Jean Grey sweater? Or is it? And everybody said, Dawn, that's too much. That is far too much. So I didn't. So
I want a picture of it. Post it. I want a picture of it.
Listen, I have entire shelves of Jean Grey listen, when I found out I was interviewing Jean Grey, I was like, oh, you mean my personal like goddess since I was a child. I'm
so honored.
Do you have a favorite? Because you've been so many people's favorite character. And so I don't think it is easier to say what I don't even know that it's that you've touched like every piece of media, like there just isn't there isn't an animated there's just not anything you haven't touched. Do you have one that do you have a favorite?
You know, honestly, my favorite is the sheer variety I've been able to do. I've not been put in a box, and I'm deeply grateful. Like, I could be psychotic Princess Morbucks, which I am if something pisses me off. You know, and just the other day I was on a hike and I'm walking through the forest and I'm like, oh, hello, little bird. And I'm like, well, there's Cinderella. You know, and then my kids running behind. I'm like, let's go. I'm like, okay, there's 18 commanders I've played. You know, I just love all of it. I honest to God do. I don't ever want to be put in a box. Freedom is my favorite thing, right? The next thing. I'm so, I can feel what this means to people, and to be able to be a part of that it's a ridiculous honor.
I do, but I'm gonna close out. I just want to ask just real quick. I've asked Magneto,
Yes.
and he wouldn't tell me.
Yes.
So would you? What? It's just you and me. What's happening in season 2
I'm
of
not
X Men Odyssey?
telling. Nope,
Yes.
I will not be
You sh-
telling you. You'll
okay.
have to
Well,
wait and see.
Jennifer Hale, thank you so much for being here on Head on Fire. If people want to get a little bit more of you, where can they connect with you on social media?
You can find me. I'm on Instagram at jhalegram, Gram. I'm on Twitter at jhaletweets, although I spend most of my time on Instagram. I am always putting up videos on the skillshub.life YouTube channel about voice acting if that's your jam. And I'll see you outside somewhere because I'm always out there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Don.